Well, first of all, thank you, Madam Chair, for the invitation to join you. It's great to see you and other council members. Good morning, all. I really appreciate your interest in this. I thought what I would do is maybe just start out to set a little bit of the context for why we're doing the work that we're doing, why it's important, why it matters to Howard County, and then hit some of the highlights from our annual report on the progress that we're making, and then happy to entertain questions. So why Climate Forward? Why does this matter? Well, first of all, just a couple of very recent developments. Just last Friday, the scientific community concluded and announced that 2024 was the hottest year ever recorded in human history. The previous hottest year was 2023. The 10 hottest years on record have all occurred in the last decade. So that's not random chance, that is a trend, and it's driven by climate change. And we are seeing the impacts on it of what's happening in the nation and around the world, whether it's extreme events that are flood events, wildfires, massive hurricane events that are happening with greater intensity and greater frequency than in the past. So what's driving this is the greenhouse effect, as you all probably know, but just a reminder for folks, the solar radiation that we get from the sun is absorbed by our atmosphere, some of which is reflected back into space, some of which stays here on the planet, which creates the conditions for life to exist on this planet. If we did not have that atmosphere, and if we did not have some of the greenhouse gases that we have, we would not have life on this planet. The challenge that we have is as we burn fossil fuels and emit greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, that creates a warming effect, and it's getting more and more intense ever since we industrialized around the world. So the challenges that we've seen, of course, are that we've also been doing this at a very rapid pace. Over time, the atmospheric concentration of CO2 has varied, but it's stayed within a fairly narrow band. But since industrialization, it has gone off the charts. We are way beyond what it had been over the last 800,000 years at a minimum. And that's based on ice core data and other research. So what's that doing to us is that we're seeing an increase in global average temperatures. While there is always variation from year to year, we are seeing that upward trend. It has also taken off, most notably over the last 30 or 40 years. And as I mentioned, 2024 being the hottest year, it's also the first year that has exceeded the 1.5 degrees Celsius goal that was set internationally. That's about 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the first time that we have seen that over the course of a year. That doesn't mean that we've totally blown that goal, but it does mean it's going to be very difficult to attain it. But we'll have to have a number of years to see how we do. But there are some scientists who say that while this is the hottest year on record, this also might be the coolest year that any of us will see in our remaining lifetimes. So what does that bring us? It brings us a variety of events, as I mentioned, floods, droughts, heat waves, tropical storms, wildfires, sea level rise, affecting local communities all around the world. Just last year, and again, this was just announced last Friday by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the United States experienced 27 weather or climate-related disasters that had costs of $1 billion or more. The collective total of those was about $182 billion just this past year. You saw that headline, the initial estimates for the wildfires happening in California right now, $150 billion. And if that's true, that's about 82% of what we experienced as a nation last year. And we're not even 2 full weeks into this year. So it is a crisis. It is something that is affecting communities. These billion-dollar disasters have increased year over year. We've seen that trend increase, especially over the last decade and a half. And the time between those kinds of billion-dollar disasters has dropped from 80 or 100 days to now just a matter of a couple of weeks between billion-dollar disasters, typically over the last few years. So that gives us a sense of the scale of the kind of impact that this phenomenon is having. So for Howard County, what does that mean? It means that we can expect to see more prolonged and intense heat waves, more extremes also on the cold side, more frequent and intense flood events, and extreme storms and heavy wind events. In our climate action plan, we talked about the projections for our part of the world. We would expect in Howard County that over the balance of this century, we may see 10 times more days where we exceed 95-degree temperatures or 100-degree temperatures. So again, that's a concern that we have for public health and well-being and public safety. And more intense rainfall. We know that this part of the nation has seen the greatest increase in the intensity of major downpours compared to other parts of the nation. And we know here in Howard County the result of that. We've experienced it. We know that it can bring very sudden, disastrous consequences to our community. So our choice is really we have to try to make changes to try to reduce the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that we are contributing to. The scientific community says that we really need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by about 50% by 2030 and reach net zero by mid-century. And that informs a lot of the planning that's been done at the global level, at the national level, here in Maryland and certainly in Howard County. So that's why in June of 2023, we launched the Howard County Climate Forward Plan. It set ambitious goals of reducing our greenhouse gas emissions by 60% by 2030, which is slightly more ambitious than the state's goal of 60% reduction by 2031. And we're aiming to achieve net zero emissions by 2045. The plan includes a comprehensive set of strategies, actions, and timelines. And we're also trying to advance this through a whole-of-government approach, strengthening our cooperation across multiple departments in the administration. Unlike the previous plan that was done back around 2014 or 2015, this plan also is community-wide in scope. The previous plan focused only on the county government's emissions and contributions. This is something that we know we need to have as a community-wide effort, and so the scope of our plan is community-wide. And we've tried to integrate equity considerations into all that we're doing with our plan because we know it's important that we cannot leave any part of our community behind as we are trying to move into a clean energy future and make our communities more resilient. So the county executive established a climate action subcabinet that brings together all the department and administration heads. We've really begun to prioritize climate action in our operations and in our planning processes. And we really are trying to do what we can to leverage state and federal funding. We know that this is something that is bigger than Howard County, but we also know that we have to do our part. Just as a reminder also, the biggest source of our greenhouse gas emissions in Howard County comes from the transportation sector. Over half of our emissions are associated with transportation. About 42% of our emissions are from the building sector. We know that our consumption of energy and on-site fuel combustion is also a big part of the equation. So our mitigation strategies include things like focusing on clean energy deployment, efforts to make our buildings more efficient and reduce emissions as a way of doing that, and really doing what we can to decarbonize our own energy supply. Also tackling on transportation, trying to do what we can to help boost EV ownership. And that means, for example, the kind of work that we've been doing to install publicly available EV chargers to make it more possible for folks to move from gas-powered vehicles to electric. Also focusing on waste reduction, organic waste, food waste. When that decomposes, it creates methane, and that is a very potent greenhouse gas. It packs a really strong punch on the climate. We're very unique in that we have one of the few counties in the state that actually has a curbside food waste, food scrap collection program, and we're working to expand that and aiming to cover all of our service area by 2030 with that. And then taking into account nature-based solutions, the kinds of things that we can do with green solutions that help not only improve our resiliency, but also can help to capture carbon out of the atmosphere and lock it in the soil so it's not in the atmosphere adding to the climate change problem. So with our resiliency strategies, we've also looked at underserved parts of the community where we need to focus our efforts, making our infrastructure more resilient, and also looking at reducing heat islands. Those are the parts of the community where you have people living who don't have much shade. They actually experience much hotter temperatures during those heat waves. The more we can get tree planting into those areas, the cooler they can be. So we produced our annual report, our first annual report. We released it in October, and we reported that we have thus far reduced our community-wide greenhouse gas emissions by 23% compared to our base year of 2005. That's as of 2022. That's the latest data that we had to do that analysis. And what I can tell you is that during the period of 2005 to 2019, our annual emission reductions were about 1% a year. Since 2019, or between 2019 and 2022, our emission reductions were on the order of about 2.7% per year. So we accelerated the annual rate of emission reductions. And that's good, but we need to do more. If we're going to hit our target for 2030 of reducing emissions by 60%, we're going to have to reduce emissions on average by about 4.7% annually. So we just need to accelerate and step up our efforts over the balance of this decade. So on the energy front, you may recall that Howard County executed the state's largest solar power purchase agreement in 2020. We are nearly 95% complete with the installation of those projects under that PPA. And it's already generating over 50% of the electricity that the county government consumes. So that's good, but we also want to see more solar development over the next few years. We currently have about 134 megawatts of solar in Howard County. Our goal for 2030 is to get to 437 megawatts. By 2045, we're looking to get to over 1,100 megawatts of solar generation in Howard County. That's ambitious, but that was woven into our plan. That's what we're trying to do to improve our ability to maintain our economy, but with cleaner energy. One of the things you may recall is the Climate Infrastructure Rebate Program. We're using that in partnership with the Community Action Council. We're calling it the Climate Forward Homes Initiative. CAC, as you may well know, they've already been doing a lot of good work with weatherization and helping low-income residents get solar and that kind of thing into their homes. With this rebate program, they're also able to help low-income residents make the switch from having fossil fuel, for example, oil and natural gas heating, to using heat pumps. And so we can pair it with the other efforts that CAC is doing with the low-income community. And it's an opportunity also to have synergies with the work that the Office of Aging and Independence does, because as we have an aging population, we also want to make sure that, folks are not going to be living on fixed incomes and exposed to the wild fluctuations in energy prices. So if they can make that switch to clean energy, they'll be better insulated from that. On the transportation front, we've now installed over 106 publicly available EV chargers. Our rate of EV ownership in Howard County is well over 4% now. As of November, we were at about 4.8%. So we are effectively tied with Montgomery County now as leading the state. Last time I looked, no other county had even topped 2% of EV penetration in their market. And I think that's a reflection of the kind of community that we have, a lot of people who are committed to clean energy and moving off of fossil fuels. We've also doubled the number of EVs we have in our fleet. We want to do more. We need to do more. But that's certainly an area that we're looking at. And then on the waste front, as I mentioned, we're expanding the green bin program. We're slightly ahead of the pace that we were looking to maintain with a view to getting to 100% coverage of the households by 2030. And then on the nature-based solutions, we've been working to promote pollinator habitat. Our goal for 2025 was to have 75 acres of registered pollinator habitat in Howard County. That's both public and private property. We're now at over 130 acres, so we're nearly twice the goal we had set for 2025. And that's a reflection, again, of the kind of community we have of people who are really interested in making those kinds of changes and putting in pollinator habitat instead of the lawns and so on. On the tree front, since 2019, we've planted about 86,000 trees in Howard County. The county executive a little over a year ago announced a goal to try to make sure that we get to a 50% tree canopy by 2030. Our original goal for that was 2045, so we're trying to push very hard. This past year, we announced a new partnership with the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, and that will result in this coming spring, we're going to be planting over 100 acres with them of about 45,000 trees. So again, we're just doing all we can to try to push to expand our tree canopy. We're also aware of the fact that we have to protect what we have. So over the past year, the Department of Recreation and Parks and the administration launched a Tree Savers program so that we're able to mobilize volunteers to help us in cutting back invasive vines and protecting the tree canopy that we have across the county. I mentioned the new partnership with DNR. And on the resiliency front, we're also studying the possibility of establishing resiliency hubs at the North Laurel Community Center and at the Gary Arthur Center. So we've got some modest funding to do some preliminary studies on how we can do that to make sure that residents have a place where they can go during extreme events, whether it's extreme heat or other weather events. On the waterfront, I would just mention that, in addition to doing sort of the bioretention kinds of things that we're doing with our stormwater system, and you're, I'm sure, well familiar with the EC Safe and Sound program. The reason I mention that latter point is that while we talk about this as being the largest capital investment in the county's history, it's also a significant investment in climate resiliency, because that's what this is about, trying to make sure our community is more resilient to the impacts of climate change. We created a HOCO Climate Forward dashboard to enable the public to track our progress on the various topics that we have covered under our action plan. And that gives us the ability to, inform folks about how we're doing, and we also provide information on what individuals can do to make a difference across all of these topics. And so really our effort is not just a whole of government effort, we're trying to build a whole of community effort. And we really welcome and appreciate the kind of partnership and support that we've had from community groups, homeowner associations, and private citizens across the county. And I would just close by noting that over the last 6 years, under County Executive Ball, and really with your support as a council over these last 6 years, Howard County has really emerged as a leader on environmental issues. We were the first county to be certified as a LEED Platinum county. We were among the first to be included in the Bee City USA program, and we enacted the strongest forest conservation law. We have our expanded food scrap collection program and all the other aspects that I've touched on earlier. That's good, and we need to build on that and continue to accelerate the progress that we're making.